Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 146 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Lieberman, and I am thrilled you are here again today. We're going to dive into something that's really important for us as business owners, and oftentimes we don't think about it, usually not because it hasn't crossed our minds, but because it's just something that takes some business owner mindset and business owner thinking time. And I know it can be tricky to fit those in. So I really want to emphasize for you today the importance of thinking about this particular topic, which is productizing your consulting services and really thinking about how this can impact your business and how you can implement this in your business to gain a slew of benefits. So we're going to talk a lot more in detail about what I mean by productized services and the benefits. I'll give you a couple of case studies. But before we do that, just a couple of updates here from Melisa Lieberman Coaching. I've already done the high-level edits of the book. So I'm talking about the book right now. I did the high-level edits. That was around Thanksgiving time. So in November, a month ago or so. And now I got the line level edits back from my editor. So I have about a week or so to get those turned around. I have to go through the book line by line, look at what he's suggesting that I do to shift those paragraphs, those lines, and then make the changes and send it back. And also, I've got a couple of images I need to get either draw myself in Canva, which might be tricky, or hire a graphic artist, and then get all that over to him. I have a colleague who's writing a forward for me. So that goes. And then once we get all of that done, then it goes to the proofreader. So things are coming together. It's kind of exciting and also a little bit scary, but that's the next step of this process. I'll definitely record an episode once the book is out and about this whole process. And hopefully the people who've helped me get here will be on that episode as well. Dr. Angela and Corey, shout out to them. They're amazing. Okay, so with that, I want to also start off this episode with some gratitude. I go over to the reviews occasionally and read them, and there's just so many kind things that you've put there and really impactful things to other consultants who are might have come across the podcast and are wondering if it's a good resource for them to listen to. So I want to read a couple of them and just say thank you so much for taking the time to leave these ratings and reviews. I truly grateful that you listened to this podcast and that it's been able to impact you and your business. So if you haven't left a review yet and feel compelled to do so, I would greatly appreciate that. But today I want to just focus on the gratitude of those who have done so and read a couple of them to you. The first one is incredible value. I get why it's free, but don't be fooled. Melisa is like a fish in the water and consistently delivers super grounded, tactical, and strategic advice in a wonderful way, too. Show notes? Check. Materials to download? Check. Incredible. That makes me so thrilled to see how holistic it comes across. That is certainly my intention. So it's great to see that it comes across that way. And then the other one I wanted to read, I can't read all of them here. So if you've left one, I truly appreciate it. I've read all of them and just want to say thank you so much. But before we dive into today's episode, the next one that I'll read for today is investing in you. I always come away with inspiration from listening to Melisa share practical ideas I put into practice on the marketing and sales side of my business. Favorite refrain of hers, start by checking your mindset. It affects everything. Thank you, Melisa. Thank you to you, 27 Ponder. I really appreciate what you wrote there. And again, this is what I strive to do every single week is give a really holistic look at running your consulting business. And that mindset is at the core of all of it. So thank you very much for those ratings and reviews. I truly appreciate you listening and putting this work into place in your business, because there needs to be more of us successful as independent consultants, showing the world that this is an effective way to get business done, to advance the business goals, and that we don't all need to be employees. That is our mission. Okay, so with that, let's talk about today's focus, which is productizing your consulting services. I'll share with you the agenda here and then we'll dive right in. So, first of all, I will start off by getting really clear about what I mean by productizing your consulting services. Then we'll talk about why, what are the benefits. I'll share a couple of real life case studies with you so you can see how this comes into practice in real life, and hopefully give you some inspiration about how this might work for your business. I'll give you a short but Melissa segment. You might be arguing with me or wondering how this applies to you specifically. And then we'll wrap it up with several questions that I'll share with you that will help you put this into practice in your own business. So, with that, the first thing that I will share, which is not on the agenda, but I'll share it with you anyway, which is an article that I wrote on this topic. So, to go deeper into this, and I can't share the whole thing with you here in this episode today, so I wanted to write it all out for you as well. There's an article now on my blog related to productizing your consulting services. You can find that on my website at melissalieberman.com. My name has some missing letters, so it's spelled Melisa, one S, Lieberman.com/resources. So just go to my website, you'll find the resources section, then click the drop down and you'll find the blog for independent consultants. And then you'll find the Productize Your Consulting Services article in there. And we'll put the link in the show notes as well. So you can just click right over. There's some good stuff in there. If I don't say so myself, go check it out. Okay, so now with that, let's talk about what do I mean by productized services. So to get very specific, what I mean when I'm talking about this today, what's in my head as I share this with you, is productized consulting involves creating a structured approach, like a well-defined roadmap or framework or methodology that helps your ideal clients achieve a specific result. So it's not about a cookie cutter. It's not about the same solution for every single client, but it's about a consistent process that you tailor to each client's unique situation. So we're talking about a repeatable framework that you leverage to create a certain type of result for your clients. And that way you can do it over and over again and refine it and improve it and create exceptions and create different ways of approaching this based on the learnings that you've had as you implement it over and over again. So I'll give you a couple of examples here to help bring to life what is productized consulting services in the context of today's episode. So you might think about an initial assessment. So you may buy one or be certified for one. A common one that I hear oftentimes from especially HR consultants is leveraging strength finders assessments for things like evaluating leadership teams, for example, or even starting off executive coaching type relationships. So those are examples of assessments. Now, of course, you can make your own, and I'll go into a case study about how that works here in a moment. And then another example of productized consulting is vendor selection. So you may have a repeatable process helping your clients to select other services vendors or other products like software type vendors, and do that over and over again, where you've got a repeatable process, potentially a repeatable RFP that you just tailor to that client, and a process that you walk them through to select their vendor and shorten the time to select a vendor, reduce the risk to select a vendor. That can be another type of productized consulting. Where you're giving someone a diagnosis is another example. So for example, you give them an assessment, and then you might not diagnose based on the results of that assessment to get to understand better the root cause of their problems, to better uncover even the problems that they're facing that they may not even realize, and be able to propose solutions from them. So it's about having a structured process where you've got a step by step process that you leverage every time with your clients. Now, of course, there may be some sub processes that you have to add or remove depending on the client, but you have the same structure each and every time. And then that you adapt that to their unique situation. So that's when I talk about productized services, what I'm referring to. And like I said, I'll get to a couple of case studies that will help further bring this to life here in a moment. Okay, let's first, though, talk about the benefits. So, why even care about this? Why worry about this or why think about it? A lot of times we think in our head, and we'll get to this in a minute with But Melissa, but we think, what we do is too tailored, too customized, or that it's just not applicable to our type of business. And so we rule it out. What I want to emphasize today in this episode is that some form or fashion of productization can occur in every type of consulting business. And the benefits for you to think about this and explore it are not just for your own business, but also for your clients. And so I want to highlight those. So, from a client perspective, the benefits are an improved client experience. They feel that you have a structured process no matter how structured it is. It could be very structured, tightly structured, very, formulaic, or it could be more loose. I always do these 3 or 4 steps. They look differently for each client, but whichever way you're approaching it, it feels so much more structured to that client. And as a result, oftentimes creates more trust with that client because they really feel like you know what you're doing. And so having that structured, proactive approach versus a more reactive approach benefits the client from a client experience perspective. Clients also benefit from the consistency. When you're doing the same thing over again and learning from it, intentionally learning from it, and intentionally evaluating and improving it versus thinking in your mind about your business in a way that's, well, I do that, it's different every single time. When you think in your mind, it's different every single time and you don't see the similarities, then you're leaving that opportunity on the table to figure out, okay, there are things that are consistent and similar every single time. Let me think more about how to improve these and get my clients more consistent results. The impact to your client, it can be greatly increased as a result of this because you're compounding your learnings, implementation or engagement after engagement, rather than just kind of being happy it's over with or excited to move on to the next project or, feeling complete with whatever it is that you've done and not leveraging those learnings and folding them back into your own business as part of your methodology. So the impact can increase for your clients' engagement over engagement. Okay, so then the next set of benefits are to you and your own business. Can be much more efficient over time for you to deliver some form of a productized service because you're reusing what you've done before in a way where you're not searching, oh, I remember I did a deck for like this a couple of engagements ago and trying to go find it. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here is that you've got a productized, so you've got a documented step-by-step process where you're able to go leverage those tools that you've implemented or leveraged before to further your client engagement, to help your client achieve what they want to achieve. So it becomes over time much more efficient for you to implement and deliver for your own clients. And then as a result, it makes it more profitable, right? Makes it more profitable because you've got that efficiency and also because you've got a baseline from which to measure your pricing against. When you've productized your services in some way, it doesn't have to be super locked down, but in some way you've productized your consulting services. Now you've got a good baseline against which you can measure the pricing and figure out where you want to refine it, where you may have had overlooked some things and increase that profitability over time. It also sets you up to bring in subcontractors because you've got things documented. This is how you want it to be done. This is what the deliverable will look like, for example. And so bringing on subcontractors, whether they're client facing or behind the scenes, you've got really good infrastructure in place to make that an option for yourself. The other thing that it does that I think we often overlook is that by productizing your consulting services, at least some of them, it simplifies your marketing and sales process. You know exactly what you're offering, you know the types of problems that what you're offering solves, and you get better and better at messaging those things because you're repeating over and over again those types of engagements and better understanding what the client's pain points are and what they think the solution might be, A, and you know that it's A plus one, a slight variation on what they think the solution is. And you're able to leverage those things in your marketing and sales. And the last couple of benefits before we move on to the case studies are when you productize your consulting services, you can also set yourself up for future exits. And by that, I mean, set yourself up as you've created your own type of productized service, such as an assessment, for example, or a certain framework, for example, you will have the ability to potentially license that in the future to sell it to other consultants when you don't want to be delivering, so heavily in the future. And I'll give you a case study about this here in a moment, but you'll have the ability, set yourself up for the option, let's say it that way, set yourself up for the option to license those types of assessments to other consultants or even to consulting firms. And the other thing that you're doing as you productize your consulting services is capturing your own specific intellectual property. That can be incredibly valuable. I don't have the numbers here right in front of me. I was shocked. I was doing some research about this a few months ago. Accenture has had, don't quote me on this, I believe it's over hundreds of acquisitions in the last 12 to 18 months, acquiring small boutique firms for their intellectual property. Again, don't quote me on those numbers, but it was a sizable number. I was shocked. And I'll go see if I can find the article and put it in the show notes. But I was shocked at the number of acquisitions Accenture has done in the last year and how many of those acquisitions were of small, even micro boutique consulting firms because they had created a very specific market niche and had productized their services in some way. So those are some of the benefits. Hopefully those have inspired you to start, really seriously consider thinking about what this would look like for your own business. So with that, let me give you a couple of case studies so you can bring this to life. The first is a case study about how a client of mine had productized his assessment. So I don't know, he had probably been delivering this certain assessment that he had created for 4 or 5 years, had really refined it over and over again, and had leveraged it as a great, not only the benefit of having this repeatable process to get his clients results, but it also served as an excellent entry point to engage with potential clients. So he would go out and it became very known for this particular assessment. So clients would come to him, they would hire him to do this assessment, which he would do. And then over time, it got really, really efficient. He had some data analysts that he had contracted that would do a lot of the heavy lifting. He would get all the results. He would write the executive summary. Those subcontractors would write all the details basically because he had done this so many times. He knew exactly how to get them to write what that really good, high quality in product. And then he would come back and present that assessment to his client who had hired him to do the assessment. And then they would almost always hire him to do follow-on engagements from that. So the benefit for him in implementing this type of productized assessment was having that entry point to engage with potential clients, having something he was known for. So clients would seek him out to do this type of work. And therefore, his lead gen became less heavy lifting, much simpler for him. And then he was able to repeat this assessment over and over again and continuously refine it and think about different, as he encountered slight variations on the use cases, he would go in and update the assessment as a result of that, or make different flavors of the assessment as a result of that. I'll say variations of the assessment based on his learnings. And then ultimately, he was able to brand this assessment and license other HR consultants to leverage it too. And not only license the actual assessment, but also, I don't want to use the word license. What he did was basically sold them access to those subcontractors who knew how to deliver the assessment. So basically, he would license them the ability to leverage the assessment and then give them the option to leverage those subcontractors he had already trained who had gone through it multiple times with him and give them that option to purchase that service from him as well. So it created some interesting revenue streams for him over time that I wanted to share with you because it's something to be thinking about for you and your business, especially as I hear from so many of you, and you may be in the same boat looking for recurring revenue streams where you're not having to be directly involved in the delivery. Okay, the second case study I want to share with you today is about strategy type engagements. So, productizing your strategy, high level strategy or road mapping type work. And I'll give you an example of how one client does this, hopefully, to get some thought process going for you and how this might apply to your business. So, the way this client does this is she starts off with a half day facilitated workshop with her clients and gets really leverages that forum to really understand what the big picture is for that organization that she's working with, what their challenges are, and helps to really get a good big picture about what they are trying to achieve. And then she follows that up with individual meetings with each of those stakeholders to gather insights. She's productized this facilitated workshop in the way that she's got this repeatable approach that she takes. She's got a repeatable approach on those follow on meetings. So she's not having to recreate the wheel every single time. She knows exactly what she's going to ask. She knows exactly what blind spots that those types of organizations typically have. So she knows where to dig essentially. And then she's able to just tweak those agendas essentially in that approach based on the specific organization. And then after she's done that half day workshop and the individual meetings, she drafts a report based on her findings. Again, all of that is a structure she's already got in place. She's leveraged some designers to even, create a really high quality deliverable and uses that framework to draft her report and then sends that draft to the stakeholders so that they can provide their input. And then finally, she conducts a strategy alignment session with all of the attendees to present that final report and the executive summary, the high level implementation plans and priorities, and is able to get their feedback in the real time, see where they may have some disconnects amongst the leadership team, and come out of there with a workable, actionable roadmap that is their strategy. She'll do it for the 3-year vision, a year, a quarter, whatever makes sense for that organization. It leverages those same 5 steps every single time. And she gets better and better and better at delivering it each time she does it. And creates so many examples for herself that she's able to leverage from a marketing perspective as well. So hopefully that gives you a second good example of how what you might already be doing right now, thinking about it in a way, if you're working on any type of strategy or implementation type projects, really thinking about what are those steps you do over and over again, and then doing the work to productize what it is you're doing so that you're not constantly searching for, oh, I remember I did this before, and trying to, I don't know if you ever do this, but I love creating brand new things. So I'll create something brand new and then realize, oh, I've already done that before. And I could have just leveraged what I had before and improved upon it rather than starting from scratch. So the same type of thing here where you're really building up a rich and deep bank of assets that you leverage for these 5 steps for this example, right? She does 5 steps to deliver this type of strategy. And so as this applies to you and your business, thinking about what are the steps that I repeat over and over again and how do I productize what I do versus recreating the wheel every time or constantly going out and searching for something that was similar that I've done in the past versus really taking the time to productize it and thinking about in a more purposeful, intentional way how you want to deliver that type of engagement over and over again. So before we wrap up with today's, I'm going to share 7 questions with you to put this into practice. But before we do, I want to just quickly touch on a But Melissa segment. And these are the common things that I hear from consultants who say, well, I'm not the type of consultant who can productize my work. And I want to challenge you on that. All of us at some level, some degree, can productize what we do. It just depends on what that actually means for your type of work. And for some of us, we can productize it, in a very definitive, structured way that with very little variation. And for others, it may look like more loosely, I always do these 6 steps, and here are the best practices for each one of those steps. So whichever end of the spectrum you fall on, and quite frankly, it could be different. You may have 3 or 4 different types of services that you offer. For some, it might be highly structured, very repeatable, very little variation. And for a couple of others in your practice, the other types of services, it might be more loosely based on a 5-step framework that shifts and is varied over time. But really think back to the reason why you're doing this in the first place. And what are the drivers for you in your business? It might be that you want to increase the profitability of your business. It might be that you want to be able to leverage non-client facing subcontractors to help with some of the work. Like really think back to the reason why you might be doing this or considering productizing some or all of your services, and then use that reason to figure out what your approach will be. So even though if you're someone whose work is very tailored or you think it's very tailored, challenge yourself on that and ask yourself, how could this part of this be more streamlined? How could part of this be more step by step where I do the same types of things over and over again? How can I make this easier for myself? The other thing that I hear oftentimes is I like variety. Well, I like variety. I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I want to say 2 things to you. The first thing I want to say to you is, okay, that's great. You like variety. There's so many ways to get variety within your clients, where even if you're doing the same kind of very structured, very repeatable type of an assessment, for an example, you're still working with other humans. There's so much variety in different types of businesses, for example. So even though you might be doing a very structured type of a product, it doesn't mean that you have to miss out on the variety. And the second thing I want to say to you about variety is the job of your business is not to entertain you. If you're looking for variety and creating a business model around that, you may want to take a step back and say, what am I doing here? Why do I need this variety? And how might I get that in other ways in my life without treating my business as something that I'm expecting it to entertain me? So those are the few things that I want to say from a But Melissa perspective today. If you're wondering how this might not apply to you, I want to challenge you on that and think about how what I've already shared with you today certainly applies to you and your business in some way. Okay, so with that, let's wrap up today's episode. And I want to challenge you on really thinking about and sitting down and spending some business owner thinking time on how you can better productize the services in your business. You've likely productized them in some way. You do things in some loose structure, for example, and you want to make it a little bit more structured. Or perhaps you've got things sort of all over the place and you recreate the wheel every single time, but you're still recreating the same type of wheel. We just want to get better at making this more efficient and repeatable and reusable and moving up the ladder in terms of having the structure in place for you in your business. So with that, hopefully today's episode inspired you to think about what it is in your business you could productize. And I want to give you these 7 questions to sit down and think about and answer for yourself. So I'm going to read them off for you here quickly. But I suggest you go to the show notes because I've written them out. We've written them all. I haven't. My podcast producer, Colette, who's amazing, she's written them out for you. But the 7 questions you want to be asking for you and your business are, number 1, what areas of my delivery could be productized? And if you think none, ask yourself the question again, what is one area of my client delivery that could be productized? Just start there. The other question to ask yourself are, what areas of my client delivery could be more productized? So you may be thinking, well, I've already got some productization going. So those repeatable frameworks or methodologies or step-by-steps going. What areas of your client delivery could be more productized? So those are the 2 questions you want to start with to identify the areas that you could tackle from a productization perspective. Then ask yourself, what would the benefits of productizing each of those be? Then ask yourself question number 4, what would it look like to productize that area? Question 5, what are the blockers of productizing that area? So what might stand in your way? And then go through each of those blockers. Number 6, go through each of those blockers and ask yourself, what are 3 ways I can overcome that blocker? And then step number 7 is ask yourself, what's my next step? So once you've gone through this process of asking yourself and identifying the areas that you can better productize in your business or start to productize in your business, then ask yourself, what my first step be? And then go do that. All right? Thank you for tuning in today. I'm so happy you were here. And thank you again for those amazing testimonials or ratings and reviews. If you have a moment and you haven't yet left one, I would greatly appreciate it. I love reading them and so appreciative of them. And also, they help other consultants to find this podcast and to help them to be more successful in their businesses as well. All right. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.